Chapter 6. Reboot. What in hell are Yggdrasil and Homeostasis up to now? Lady Bastamon growled softly under her breath in frustration as she sat next to him, not wanting to wake the sleeping children. It had been a long, stressful day for all of them. The day had started out like any other day, with fear and panic. Something truly odd was wrong with the digital world. A strange illness had traveled across the digital world, making even the most peaceful of Digimon go wild and attack mindlessly. And it had all started with the closing of the digital gates between the two worlds. The closing of the gates was only supposed to be temporary, as a means to help the world heal from the damage caused by Belial Vamdemon and his allies. The human Oikawa's energy had not been enough to heal what had been tainted by the vampire. But something had gone wrong. Digimon had begun growing ill. Janai had disappeared, only to come back 2 years later, a different man, and spreading rumors of the destruction of the human world, the true enemy. Data errors began appearing all over the digital world, causing the Digimon to become either ill or disappear. And then there was the Libra. Felismon narrowed his eyes as he thought. The Libra was at the center of all their problems, but he could not decide if it was the cause or merely a victim, a pawn of a greater scheme. Based on various rumors from his scouts, the Libra had unknown destructive powers, enhanced by the rage and anger from either pain or fear, both mental and physical. This is bad. Felismon remembered seeing the Digimon through a distortion that had briefly appeared outside the barrier of his kingdom when he and the other monarchs had been escorting the unaffected Digimon into the safety within the borders of his kingdom. He had seen the Libra and many of the chosen Digimon fighting other Digimon that entered the human world through the distortions. But what truly worried him was the countdown clearly visible in the sky now. He hoped the barrier surrounding his kingdom would keep them safe from whatever the countdown was supposed to do. If not for him, then for the 4 injured children in his care. I don't know, but we must be prepared, Felismon said as his eyes lingered on the 2 sleeping children. Felismon had been more than a little grateful that he found the children when he did. Distortions had been appearing all over the digital world, allowing Digimon to be in one continent 1 minute, and then another the next. Felismon personally felt it was fate coming into play when a distortion opened up to one of the many deserts of Server. Distortions of other parts of the digital world tended to stay open anywhere between 2 to 15 minutes. Thankfully, the distortion had stayed open long enough for him and the other monarchs to jump into the distortion to save the children. Felismon still felt sick, watching the death of his brother, and the empty hole in his chest wasn't any better. Before he could seek vengeance on Yggdrasil's royal knight, the other disappeared through a distortion that had appeared right under him, along with Janai, who had been hovering over Ken's unconscious body with something in his hand. Felismon wasn't sure if he should have been relieved or enraged by that fact. Probably enraged. Yeah, definitely that. The children's D3s and D terminals were damaged, except for Ken's, whose was stolen. If he ever ran into the Royal Knight or Janai ever again, he was going to rip their digicore right out of their chest and watch them die in agony. Felismon rubbed his brother's digitama absently, hoping beyond hope that he would hatch soon. Ken needed his partner to heal. He was sure of it. And he needed his brother too. He was the oldest. Despite not being able to evolve to Ultimate, it was his job to protect both of his brothers. They shouldn't have been alone, facing the Royal Knight in an unwinnable battle. Felismon sighed as he closed his eyes. What could I have done? Stingmon is stronger and wiser than me. Felismon didn't envy his brother for how strong he had grown with his partner. He didn't envy his brother for caring about his human partner more than anything in the world. He was happy for his brother, relieved that he had found his calling, even if it was in the hands of those stupid gods. But that didn't make the sliver rage and hatred disappear anytime soon. If anyone were to ask, he would deny it. But to himself, if he were truly honest, he hated himself. I should have been there. I should have protected them from this cruelty. This wasn't the first time he wished this. He so wanted to help his brothers and protect them from everything. Who am I kidding? I would just get in the way. Felismon's hand tightened around the strange device that had appeared when he retrieved Ken from the desert. Is this really all I can do? Sit here and hope? Felismon did go to the village of beginnings with Queen Chessmon, but that had been an adventure of its own. File Island had not been saved from the corruption that affected the digital world. Digimon that got close to the data error would go crazy, haywire, attacking both enemy and friend alike. Many infected Digimon even entered through distortions that took them to the human world, although the main damage seemed to center around Server. But that didn't bother him as much as it should. What truly bothered him, what truly enraged him, was the sight of Janai turning into the Kaiser, a 14-year-old version of his beloved little brother. Felismon had to contain his anger when he saw Janai instructing several of those mindless Digimon to attack the village of beginnings and the Digitamas when they arrived. Leomon and several others had protected them bravely and honorably. Felismon honestly wished he had stayed to fight those cowards, especially Janai. But as Queen Chessmon reminded him, they had 4 Digitamas to retrieve and protect. They had not been the only ones wanting those Digitamas. Felismon still had that terrible, heart-wrenching ache in his chest. What would have happened if he hadn't gotten to his brother in time? Felismon protectively held his brother's Digitama a bit more firmly in his arms. What would have Janai done if he had been able to find his brother's Digitama? He sighed. Finding his brother's Digitama hadn't really been that hard. They were siblings, sharing the same genetic code within them. He would always be able to find his brother, no matter where he was. And it did help that his brother's Digitama had been far away from the battle, and with the other 3 chosen Digimon that had fallen in battle. The 4 Digitamas had all been together, which made the search all that much easier. And the shocked, enraged look Janai had on his features when they left the village with the Digitamas firmly in their arms was so worth it. Felismon rested his head on the wall, only vaguely noticing Lady Bastamon getting up to check on Miyaki and Iori, who were in another room with their partners, attempting to fix their D3s and D terminals. Why? Why did this have to happen? Why indeed? Why had a royal knight harmed the Chosen? They were their protectors, their saviors. They were the ones that saved them from Vamdamon when they couldn't. They were the ones that saved them from Devimon when they couldn't. They were the ones that saved them from the Dark Masters, Vamdamon again, Daemon, and Apocalypmon. The royal knights weren't there to protect them from the evils of this world. It was the children. The same children that Yggdrasil and Janai wanted to destroy, along with the human world. But why? Why bring them here? Why not just attack them while they were in their own world? The humans did not have the means to protect themselves against Among Digimon. None of this made any sense. But what was truly confusing was Alphamon. He frowned as yellow eyes gazed out the window, where the countdown could clearly be seen. Why did Alphamon attack them? He would have understood if it was Craniamon, Dynasamon, or even Lord Nightmon. They followed Yggdrasil faithfully. However, Alphamon was different. He was the oldest of the royal knights, the supposed leader, the aloof hermit. But what truly made Alphamon's involvement odd was that he was never known to follow Yggdrasil's orders, especially when he felt the digital god was wrong. So why was Alphamon helping Yggdrasil? Was he infected with the illness? Or was there something else going on? Felismon groaned. There were far too many questions, and not enough answers. For now, maybe he should worry about the Digimon and children under his care, and if the barrier would truly protect them. The countdown now flashed 4:59 as it continued to count down. Felismon swallowed nervously. He truly hoped the barrier was enough to protect everyone. Deep within a secret computer room, and protected by magic on the lower level of the castle, the Digimental of Kindness was giving off an odd energy to the barrier program he had running. But it wasn't the only one now. Upon the children entering his kingdom in their weakened state, the Digimentals of courage, friendship, love, purity, sincerity, knowledge, and even miracles left the D-terminals to supply their own energy to the barrier that protected them from the danger that was to come. Felismon glanced at Ken then, worry filling his every being. Ken looked so weak and so fragile. He didn't deserve this. Not again. Felismon wanted to scream, wanted to punch something, to be able to let out the fear and anger that was currently boiling inside. Being unable to destroy Alphamon was one thing, but to see one brother killed and another close to death again had almost sent him over the edge. Felismon knew he would forever be haunted by the image of Bastamon, Banchu Leomon, and Queen and King Chessmon gathering around the injured children, assessing the damage before taking them to the kingdom. The damage had been too great. Hidayori had been the least injured. He only had a sprained ankle from when his partner pushed him behind some desert shrubbery before using his body as a shield. Inoue Miyako had been a little more injured than her friend, but it wasn't bad. She had a few bruises like her friend and a dislocated shoulder, which had been easy to reset. They had both been thankfully conscious, unlike the other members of their team. Felismon's hand tightened around the strange device in his anxiety. Moromiya Daisuke and Minamoto Ken had been the most hurt. Daisuke had suffered from several burns on his chest, arms, and legs, and a deep, ugly wound on his chest from, what they assumed, trying to protect Ken from most of the blast. He also had a few broken ribs, but they hadn't known that until after they examined him back at the palace. Ken suffered from a terrible wound on his forehead and on his upper right calf. He also had a burn on the right side of his chest, as well as a concussion. Both boys had been bleeding badly, and it was only thanks to Miyako and Lady Bastamon, who had managed to still the blood with pieces of their own clothing, that they were alive. "Please wake up," he pleaded softly, wishing he would wake up. Ken had been the only one yet to wake up from his injuries. Well, that wasn't exactly true. Ken had woken up briefly while he had been carrying him in his arms. He, however, had been very confused and disoriented. He seemed to have been unable to focus very well, and his speech had been slurred when he tried to speak. However, Ken had not stayed conscious for very long. Ken had only been able to weakly call out, "Wormmon," and Felismon, before losing consciousness once again. Felismon. Felismon's body straightened and stilled, his breath caught in his throat. The fallen angel Digimon shifted his gaze to Ken, his arms tightening around his brother's Digitama as it began to glow brighter than it had been a moment ago. "Oh, thank Shakamon," he whispered under his breath with a relieved sigh as he walked over to Ken's bed. His brother's Digitama grew brighter and brighter. From the corner of his eye, Daisuke had begun to stir from his light doze. The other children had been just as worried about his best friend's health when he had regained consciousness several hours ago and had wanted to stay up to watch over his friend's still body. But the boy's injured body had demanded rest. So with the promise that he would not leave their side, and with Chikomon snuggled against his partner's side, the child fell into a light sleep. "I was so worried about you," Felismon said as he placed himself within Ken's line of vision. How do you feel? Ken closed his eyes for a moment before attempting to focus on his face. Hurt. Tired. I know, Felismon said softly as he gently ran his fingers through the boy's hair. We were only able to stop the blood flow and to cool your burns right now. Cutamon and the others will be back later to finish healing your wounds. The others were exhausted and needed the rest. He had demanded them to get something to eat, rest up a bit, and then come back to finish healing the two boys. They both needed another round of treatments. For now, the two would just have to settle for the painkillers that were entering their bodies through the IVs. Ken nodded weakly as he turned his gaze to the Digitama. It glowed brighter and brighter the closer it got to him. It was ready to hatch. Felismon gently placed the Digitama on Ken's chest and watched with a smile as his brother was born. Leafmon stood there on Ken's chest with teary eyes before he latched onto his partner's neck with a happy, "Ken-chan! Ken-chan! Ken-chan!" Ken smiled weakly at his partner as tears slowly began to fall down his cheeks. Leafmon. Despite Ken's weak, reassuring smile, Leafmon's eyes still filled with guilt and shame. "I'm sorry," he cried. "I'm sorry I couldn't protect you." Chikomon, who had been watching Daisuke as he slept, jumped over to Ken's bed and began to apologize as well. "Enough with the apologies," Daisuke groaned as he cracked an eye open. Despite the boy's annoyed tone, Daisuke looked relieved that his friend was finally up and conscious. Felismon smiled at the two of them, simply relieved that the two were reunited and safe. However, just as Felismon pulled his chair closer to the bed, the strange device burst to life, floating out of his hand and hovering above Ken's weak body. D-Scanner, version 2.0, registration program activated. The device's mechanical voice rang. Felismon froze, half expecting it to release the same corrupted data that affected the rest of the digital world, while the more logical side of him realized that this was a digivice. The D-Scanner was slightly bigger than Ken's D3, which had been stolen by Janai, along with Ken's D-Terminal, but still had that same gray texture for the body. The grip, instead of being black like Ken's old device, was green, most likely to match Wormmon's skin tone, while the buttons were the same tone of red as his own skin tone. There was also a golden ring around the screen. Scanning. The screen glowed, and they all watched with surprise as a green ray of light shot out of the screen and traveled over Ken's body twice, before scanning him as well. "What on earth is going on?" Daisuke asked, confusion and suspicion filling his voice, voicing Ken's silent question as he gazed at the digivice in slight fear. "Scanning complete. Analyzing data." The voice rang before speaking several seconds later. "Analysis complete. To complete registration of D-Scanner version 2.0, please confirm data. Owner, chosen of kindness and forgiveness. Ichijuji Ken. Is this correct?" "Actually, it's Minamoto. Minamoto Ken," Ken said hesitantly, the fear now gone, and replaced with confusion. "Updating. Please wait. Updating. Updating complete. Owner, chosen child of kindness and forgiveness, Minamoto Ken. Updating Digimon Partners profile." "Partners?" Confusion rang out of Ken's voice as he gazed at the digivice, but he hadn't been the only one. Daisuke and the rest of them had voiced their own confusion as well. "Chosen Digimon of kindness, Leafmon. Level, Baby 1. Baby form of Wormmon. Chosen Digimon of forgiveness, Felismon." "What?" Felismon jumped to his feet, shocked, just as his younger brother cheered. Oh, Oni-san! Oni-san! You're Ken-chan's partner now! You're Ken-chan's partner now! When did this happen? Level perfect. Perfect form of Wormmon. Adding. Registration complete. Would you like a rundown of main functions? Sure, Ken answered in a daze, obviously still trying to process what had just happened. He didn't blame him. He was in a similar state. Accessing main functions. Main functions. Evolution. Normal evolution. Enable. Jogress evolution. Enable. Armor evolution. Enable. Spirit evolution. Disable. Armor? Ken murmured. I don't have a digimental. What's spirit evolution? Daisuke asked, but no one seemed to have an answer for him. Communication and emails. Voice communication. Enable. Email. Enable. Digimon Analyzer. Updating. Updating complete. Digimon Analyzer. Enable. Map. Updating map. Updating complete. Map. Enable. Storage. Digimental. Enable. Digimon. Enable. Digital gates. Enable. The voice said before the screen returned to black and fell to the bed. No one said anything for a long moment, simply staring at the new digivice that landed a few inches from Ken's hand. Felismon collapsed into his chair, wondering what had just happened. Had he truly just become Ken's partner? Before anyone could comment on what had just happened, Nanomon and Etamon rushed into the room with fear written all over their features. Lord Felismon! Nanomon yelled as he ran into the room with a laptop in his arms. It's bad. It's very bad, Etamon said as he shifted from foot to foot. What's going on? He asked the two Digimon he had left in charge to research the odd countdown in the sky. The countdown, it's a reboot, Nanomon told him in a panic, showing him the strange data on the computer screen, along with a warning flashing on the screen. A what? The digital world, Etamon said, his whole body and voice shaking in fear, is being rebooted to a time before the holy beasts ever walked this world. Felismon gasped, turning his gaze towards the window. But it was too late. The countdown was already flashing 0. Felismon watched in horror, gripping his partner's hand, as a bright flash of light began engulfing the digital world. Shakamon, please protect us.